Imagine for a moment that every thought you release, every emotion you hold, and every word you speak are invisible seeds shaping your destiny. In ancient esoteric wisdom, there exists a supreme art, powerful, veiled, and profoundly transformative, known as Kriyâshakti, the spiritual force by which enlightened will becomes creation. Today you will enter one of the best-kept secrets of the Theosophical tradition, passed down by the enigmatic Helena Blavatsky. This is not merely about attracting superficial desires, but about manifesting from the soul's core in alignment with the eternal purpose of the self. This text is a key. It opens inner doors to awakened consciousness, to the sacred science of directed thought, will in action, and energy as the bridge between the invisible and the visible worlds. Prepare to discover how great initiates shaped reality, not through physical effort, but through silent mastery of mind and spirit. Kriyâshakti is not a trick, it is an alchemy, and you are about to remember it. Since the archaic days when the lords of the flame cast their shadow over the earth, still without weapons, up to the present cycle in which man, degraded by the inverted reflection of his own divinity, seeks to dominate matter without first mastering himself, thought has been the hidden axis of becoming. There is no creation without idea, no idea without will, no will without a focal point of consciousness to sustain it. In the esoteric scriptures of all peoples, the Sefer Yetzirah, the Zohar, the Upanishads, the Enuma Elish, we find the echo of the same veiled truth, that all that exists is densified thought, frozen action, an emanation of the word across decreasing planes of vibration. This work is not a philosophical treatise, nor a mystical speculation for the delectation of those who seek to adorn their ego with borrowed knowledge. It is an initiatory manual, not exoteric, but inner, for those who dare to dive into the abyss of their own mind and understood that the visible reality is but the reflection of its invisible currents of thought. The power to manifest, whether wealth or ruin, joy or torment, does not lie in repeated phrases nor pleasing visualizations, but in the hidden science called Kriyâshakti, which is the power of the elevated mind, directed and condensed to such a degree of purity and fire that it stamps its seal on the astral substance and the etheric force without opposition. Every idea sustained by will, nourished by desire, directed with intention, and polarized by emotion, becomes a living astral form, endowed with relative intelligence, trajectory, and destiny. This form, born in the mental world's lower planes, descends through the ethers until it finds concrete manifestation, bringing consequences for its creator and the one to whom it is directed. The ignorant creates unknowingly. The mechanical thinker fabricates shadows of pain. The fool calls chance the inevitable return of his own projections. But the adept who has purified the lower mind, who has established the governance of the buddhi, whose will is a silent fire, manifests by choice, not impulse, creates with consciousness, not hope, and molds future karma with the serenity of one who contemplates from the plane of causes and not effects. This work is therefore a path toward that mastery, not to impress, but to instruct, not to please the ego, but to dissolve it in the light of the inner thinker, not to fulfill desires, but to recognize their elusive nature and turn them into instruments of evolution. Here it will be explained without melodrama or superstitious rhetoric. What is thought in terms of esoteric metaphysics? How is it structured in the invisible planes? And which entities govern it? What relationship does it have with the law of karma, desire, will, and matter? How to discern between white and black magic in the use of thought? How to direct, focus, and project mental energy consciously? How to attract or dissolve circumstances, not from the ego, but from the higher self? How thought generates wealth or misfortune, not as punishment or reward, but as a reflection of its own vibrations. The reader who perseveres in these pages with a tempered soul will find not advice, but keys, not recipes, but keys of fire, not promises of well-being, but warnings of the price mastery demands. For whoever wishes to control thought must first be worthy of it. And whoever aspires to manifest realities must renounce the desire that they manifest for personal pleasure, because only the initiate can think without impulse. Only the adept can create without karma. Only the wise can desire without error. This book is for them, or for those willing to become them. Kriyâshakti, the secret art of manifestation. Based on the teachings of Helena Blavatsky. We have noticed that more than 80% of those who visit our channel are not subscribed. You can support this project by pressing the subscribe button and liking the video. Thank you for inspiring us to keep creating more and better content for you. Are you ready to transform your life? Chapter 1. The primordial archetype of thought. Before light was separated from ether by the fiat of law, before the sound of the word vibrated in the depths of space, even before the night of the Absolute breathed its first differentiated breath into the substance of itself, there existed in pure potential what the wise have called, with reverent fear, the veiled language, the universal ideation. This is not thought as man understands it, who thinks because he does not know, who covers himself because he is separated, who builds ideas because he does not see the essences. Universal ideation is thought before it becomes dual, before it implies subject and object, before it extends in form and intention. It is the mind of the all, the very foundation of cosmic existence. It does not arise, it emanates, it does not act, it vibrates, it does not create, it begets. Its being is identical to the being of that which will later be created. Within it lie all future possibilities as eternal patterns, not fixed forms, but latent potentials of becoming. And yet this ideation, sleeping in the bosom of Pararaman, the unknowable, eternal, and motionless non-being, must, in the cycles of Mamantara, arise as active thought through the Logos, the first thinker, the architect of worlds. The Logos is not a personal God nor a concrete entity. It is the first point of relation between the unknowable Absolute and the manifested cosmos. It is pure thought turned into act. It is silent word transformed into vibration. And that vibration, which is number, proportion, rhythm, and color, begins to trace in the cosmos the archetypes of all that is to exist. In esoteric cosmogony, the Logos is called Ma'at in the East, the great intelligence. In Kabbalah, Binah, the active intelligence that structures primitive chaos. In Egyptian Hermeticism, Thoth, the mental architect of the universe. He is not the creator, but the thinking creator. Through his consciousness, which is pure ideation in activity, worlds arise. He does not create them with hands or tools. He emanates them as densified thoughts, objectified ideas, forms of his consciousness transformed into cosmic patterns. Thus, every star, every atom, every human soul is first an idea in the mind of the Logos before becoming substance or experience. This process does not occur in time, for the Logos itself precedes time. His thought is not linear nor sequential, but simultaneous, total, abstract, and concrete all at once. Each archetype, whether of a flower, a human being, a planet, or a law, is a living form in the universal mental space, which is neither a place nor a void, but the vibratory field of the cosmic mind. There reside the eternal patterns of all things, what the layman calls Platonic ideas, the Vedas call Purushas, and Christian mystics refer to as secondary Logos. This mental space, also called the archetypal plane, is neither imaginary nor metaphorical, but an objective reality for the consciousness that has ascended beyond discursive thought. Initiates perceive it not with eyes or the lower mind, but with the synthetic vision of the awakened soul. There one does not think, one contemplates, one does not create, one reveals. There every future form already exists, but in a vibratory state, waiting to be drawn down to lower planes through a focus of will and emotion that will cause it to descend into the worlds of form. And here begins the mystery of individual manifestation. When a human being thinks, What he truly does is activate an infinitesimal portion of the universal ideation field. His thought, although taken as his own by ego, desires, and perceptions, is a local distortion of a far vaster cosmic pattern. No human thought lacks roots in a superhuman archetype, but ordinary consciousness does not perceive it because it is chained to the plane of lower manners, the desiring, selfish, fragmented mind. Human thought is generally a distortion of the original pattern because it passes through filters of personal memory, desire, fear, judgment, and ignorance. Thus, what on the archetypal plane was a perfect idea becomes, on the lower mental plane, a chaotic or inverted form. Man does not think. He mistranslates a truth he does not comprehend, yet even that flawed translation holds power, for every thought form has life on the astral plane. Here lies the hidden root of karma. Every thought is a vibrating cause, an energetic seed seeking to fructify in matter. An individual's thoughts are not merely things passing through his mind. They are energy forms that project outward. They attach themselves to beings and objects, condense or disintegrate according to the law of vibratory affinity. Each thought inevitably becomes karma, whether immediate, individual, or collective. When many human beings hold similar thoughts, they not only generate personal karma, but weave collective egregores, astral entities with identity, intention, and force. These entities are not symbolic, but real. They feed on attention, emotion, and repetition. A city may be enveloped in an egregore of fear. A nation may be possessed by an egregore of hatred or ambition. A family lineage may be bound to an egregore of ruin, repeated through generations. This is not metaphorical magic, but the hidden science of vibration and mental form. From archetypal thought to collective karma, there is a direct, invisible, yet unbreakable line. When divine patterns are perceived by a pure soul, they descend as inspiration, just law, and beauty. But when those same patterns are distorted by ignorant masses, they become destructive ideologies, divisive dogmas, social systems reflecting the selfishness of their creators. The karma of humanity is ultimately the karma of its thought. Thus, thought is not a function of the brain nor a tool of the ego, but the bridge between the world of causes and that of effects. To master thought means to restore it to its source, to re-educate it in archetypal patterns, purify it from desire, and align it with higher will. The adept neither thinks positively nor visualizes success. The adept contemplates, knows, vibrates, and from that state emits thought like a focused ray, like vibrant geometry, like a divine act. His thought is silent prayer, impersonal decree, creation without error. The profane, by contrast, thinks with fear, desires anxiously, acts ignorantly, and therefore reaps shadow, scarcity, and confusion. His thought obeys not the logos, but the distorted echo of his karmic past. He wants to manifest abundance without knowing the law. He wants to influence without understanding the price. He wants to create without assuming consequence, and so he fails, or worse, briefly triumphs only to sink into deeper chains. This treatise, from its first word to its last breath, teaches how to recover the lost art of thinking like gods, not to dominate men, but to cooperate with the Logos in the eternal work of sacred manifestation. For every human being is destined to be a conscious creator, a Manasaputra in action, a living reflection of the divine mind, but to do so must renounce the right to think for pleasure and embrace the duty to think with purpose. It is not enough to think well. One must think from the correct plane with the correct vibration, in the correct direction, and for the correct causes. This is the essence of Kriyâshakti, the science we will unveil in the coming chapters, not as a mechanical technique, but as an inner transfiguration. Only he who has purified his soul can think without sowing karma. Only he who has known the archetype can manifest without error. Thought is divine. The use of human thought is the mastery of initiatic thought, and toward that mastery this book leads you. Chapter 2, The Sevenfold Constitution of the Human Thinker. Every visible human being is but the peripheral shell of an invisible structure composed of 7 principles or bodies intertwined at different degrees of vibration, consciousness, and substance. This 7-fold constitution is not a spiritual hypothesis, but a hidden fact known and taught from the Orphic mysteries to the Arabian doctrines of Tibet. Man is not a single being, but an embodied hierarchy. And thinking, far from being an act exclusive to the physical brain, is a vibratory phenomenon that passes through all these principles, from the eternal Ma to the dense body, generating reflections, distortions, accelerations, or blockages according to the level from which it originates and toward which it descends. Here, then, is the essential structure of the human thinker, revealed in the language of Eastern occultism and corroborated by all inner schools of wisdom. 1. Ma, the divine principle, identical in essence to the Absolute. It does not think, it is pure being. 2. Buddhi, the spiritual soul, the receptacle of divine wisdom. It perceives, intuits, contemplates. 3. Manas, the mind which divides into higher and lower. It is the true thinker. 4. Karma, desire, emotion, attraction. It distorts or energizes thought. 5. Prana, vital energy, the force of support and movement. 6. Linga sarira, the etheric double, the subtle mold of the physical body. 7. Stula sarira, the physical body, visible and dense. When we speak of the thinker, we refer to the manasic principle, but manas is dual, and this duality is the key to all mystery. On one side, higher manas, manas taijasa, vibrates in union with buddhi and contemplates divine archetypes. On the other side, lower manas has sunk into matter, into desires, into passions, and thinks from the ego, the separated I, the temporal impulse. The conflict of human thought, its instability, ambivalence, and power to create or destroy, derives precisely from this internal division. One cannot master thought without knowing this dual manas and recognizing that almost all humanity thinks from the lower manas side, that is, from desire colored by the mind, from rationalized desire, from intellectually justified emotion. Most human thoughts are not born in manas, but in ma, only dressed in manas's forms. Thus a desire becomes thought, a passion is rationalized, a wound turns into ideology. Thought, then, is not pure but reactive. It is not creative but reflective. And being so, it does not align with the archetypal patterns of Ma, but with distortions of the lower astral, generating mental forms born twisted and attracting painful karma. The key, therefore, lies in the reconciliation of lower manas with higher manas. This is the great work of the true esotericist, to reunite what incarnation has separated. The neophyte who aspires to direct thought causally, not reactively, must learn to silence Ma, to illuminate the mind with the light of buddhi, and to think not from the transient personality, but from the immortal individuality. This is neither a psychological task nor an intellectual exercise. It is a transfiguration of consciousness, a displacement of the I-axis from the perishable toward the eternal. But this transfiguration cannot be achieved without understanding how each body or principle alters or conditions thought according to its own nature. It is necessary, then, to go through these 7 levels one by one and see how they interact with thought. Ma, the universal principle, does not participate in thought because its nature is absolute. It is the spirit of the all but the ultimate ground from which all other principles emanate. In it, there is no form or content, only pure existence. To think from Ma is to think in the absolute it is to be. Buddhi, the spiritual soul, is the vehicle of pure intuition. It does not think by comparison or analysis, but contemplates eternal truths and transmits them to higher manas as sudden light, as total understanding. When buddhi illuminates manas, thought becomes living truth. But if manas is not aligned, buddhi cannot penetrate, and its lights are misunderstood or ignored. Higher manas, the true divine thinker, vibrates on the causal plane. It receives archetypal ideas, sees the pattern of things, and knows how to think in terms of unity, law, and purpose. To think from higher manas is to think without attachment, error, or desire, but higher manas in most humans is inactive or underdeveloped because the link with buddhi has not been restored and descent into matter has weakened this connection. Lower manas, on the other hand, is the concrete, discursive, analytical mind, the mind of logic, judgment, language, and comparison. It is useful on phenomenal planes, but contaminated by ma. By itself, lower manas cannot think correctly, for it always thinks from the ego, from the urgency of desire, from the wound of separation. Karma, desire, is the great distorter of thought. It does not think but colors, drives, and manipulates thought. Strong desire dresses itself in ideas. Hatred seeks intellectual justification. Fear creates defensive and attacking thoughts. Every uncontrolled emotion generates chaotic, repetitive, or destructive thoughts. If the thinker does not master more, their thoughts will never truly be theirs. Prana, vital energy, does not think but supports thought in the subtle body. When prana is turbulent, agitated, or poisoned by dense emotions, thought becomes confused, slow, or fragmented. The purity of prana, which depends on food, environment, rest, but above all emotional control, is indispensable for thought to flow without disturbance. Linga sarira, the etheric double, is the energetic mold of the physical body. Thought patterns, especially those repeated with emotional force, are imprinted there. It is like a slate where thoughts are etched as forms. Obsessive or repetitive thoughts leave scars on the etheric double, which later influence the physical body and the mind itself. Cleansing this body requires vibratory discipline, energetic purification, and proper mantras. Sthula sarira, the physical body, is the densest and slowest instrument. The brain, as part of this body, does not think but translates subtle body vibrations into electrical impulses. When the body is sick, dormant, or intoxicated, the mind becomes dull. When the body is mastered, disciplined, and harmonized, it becomes a temple through which higher thought can manifest clearly. Thus we see that thought is not an exclusive function of one principle, but the result of alignment. When the seven bodies are misaligned, thought is dark, contradictory, reactive. When harmonized, thought is clear, focused, creative. The mastery of thought does not consist of merely thinking well or avoiding the negative. It consists in thinking from the correct plane, using the proper instrument, maintaining the necessary vibratory purity, and knowing that each thought passes through 7 filters before manifesting. The true esotericist does not seek to control thought like one tames a horse, but like one purifies a temple so that the fire of the Logos may descend within it. It is not about thinking more, but about thinking from higher. Not about creating thoughts, but allowing the higher thinker to express without distortion. The ego cannot think truthfully. Only the higher self can. And only when the bridge between both, the antakarana, is built with effort, silence, meditation, and service, can the human mind become a faithful reflection of the divine mind. Thinking is, therefore, a sacred responsibility. It is to create forms that will live beyond time. It is to build causes that will return as destiny. It is to invoke forces that will influence other beings. Only he who understands the sevenfold structure of the human thinker and masters each of its principles can begin to exercise that power with wisdom, compassion, and eternal purpose. Chapter 3. Vibration, Form, and Sound. The Creative Triad. In the hidden universe there is no inert matter, no dead form, no empty sound. Everything, visible or invisible, is vibration. All that exists vibrates, and every vibration, whether luminous, sonic, dense, or subtle, is an expression of consciousness in motion. Those who grasp this fundamental truth stop thinking in terms of physical causes and begin to understand that the architecture of the world is actually an invisible symphony of organized waves, governed by harmonic laws that transcend the mechanical knowledge of modern man. In the ancient mysteries, the creative triad of all form was known as vibration, form, and sound. These three are not separate things, but successive manifestations of the same energy operating on different planes. Every vibration generates form. Every form has a corresponding sound, and every sound can alter or destroy form, raising or degrading the vibration. This secret knowledge has been carefully guarded by initiates for eons, not out of elitism, but for protection. Because to know vibration is to know the root of form, and to know true sound, not external sound, but its vibratory essence, is to hold the key to creating, modifying, or destroying realities at will. For this reason, sacred sound was taught only in the highest degrees of the mysteries, and true mantras were sealed with vows of silence and purity. The foundation of this science is Akasha, the primordial subtle substance, the ether in which all vibrations, thoughts, actions, and sounds are inscribed. Akasha is neither matter, field, nor void. It is the mother principle of form, the vibratory support of all worlds, the record and the medium through which ideas become things. Akasha is shaped by vibration, and every strong thought, every sound uttered with intention, leaves a mark within it. Just as a musical note makes a distant string vibrate by sympathy, a thought can activate a hidden form in Akasha and precipitate it into the visible world. But not all thoughts hold this power. Only those sustained with intensity, clarity, will, and defined emotional polarity have enough energy to inscribe themselves in Akasha and descend to the denser planes. The medium through which thought acts upon Akasha is sound, but not physical sound, rather internal sound, the monastic vibration condensed by the fire of desire and directed by will. This vibration can express itself as spoken word in certain mantras or words of power, but its essence is silent, invisible, and hidden. This is the mystery of Ba, the sacred word. Ba, in Brahmanic doctrines, is more than the goddess of language. She personifies the creative verb, the feminine aspect of the word, the vibration emanating from divine thought that structures form. There is the Vagin unmanifested, the unspoken word, pure thought, the Bar media, the internal sound of the soul thinking without words, and the Baha externa, the physical speech. Of the three, only the first holds true creative power, the others are its shadows. The true magician, therefore, is not interested in spoken words as tools, but in the silent mental vibration that precedes and persists beyond the word. Their word may seem simple, but if spoken from the higher manas, activated by buddhi, and projected through a pure channel, that word becomes a decree. And a decree is an order to the etheric matter, a vibratory instruction that shapes astral substance according to an archetypal idea. This process is better understood by seeing how mental vibration forms shapes on the astral plane. Every thought, as previously mentioned, generates a form. This form is not random but has color, geometry, intensity, and direction depending on the nature of the thought. A thought of hatred, for example, is angular, dark, reddish, and emits piercing waves. A thought of gratitude is rounded, luminous, golden, and emits soft waves. This difference is not symbolic but structural. Just as a musical note can shape patterns in sand or water through waves, so too the human mind draws in the astral ether, the forms that will later attract corresponding events, people, and experiences. This is the hidden language of thought form, a language based not on words, but on coded vibrations that astral substance recognizes and reproduces. When a thought is repeated many times with the same emotion, it creates a groove in the etheric double, a kind of vibratory imprint easily reactivated. That is why some thoughts seem automatic. They have already been recorded as energetic pathways. Breaking these pathways requires a contrary vibration, sustained and charged with opposite intention. Thought is not erased by another thought, but by a vibration that is stronger, higher, and more coherent. The adept knows this, and so they do not combat negative thoughts with hollow affirmations, but with superior vibration. They do not think positively, but align their mind with a purer, higher archetypal pattern, and impress it so intensely on Akasha that the previous form dissolves from disuse or vibratory collision. The ritual use of sound, in mantras, chants, or invocations, is precisely based on this science. No true mantra lacks an archetypal vibration corresponding to a hidden form or intelligence. Mantras are not magic formulas by chance. They are vibratory keys. Every sound connects with an aspect of universal form, and when pronounced with the right tone, rhythm, intention, and purity, it can open hidden doors, awaken dormant forces, or attract specific entities. But this science in profane hands is dangerous, for every sound pronounced without mastery, awareness, or purity not only fails to activate the desired result, but may open wrong channels, summon lower astral forms, or reactivate chaotic thoughts already created. That is why initiates have fallen, because the true word, if not directed from higher manas, instantly becomes flesh. The disciple who wishes to use thought to create, transform, or dissolve must first understand that it is not enough to imagine or visualize. They must learn to 1. Tune their internal vibration to the pattern they wish to manifest. 2. Purify their mental channel by silencing ego and desire. 3. Direct the vibration with sustained will without distraction. 4. Use the proper sound or mental form, not from desire but from knowledge. 5. Respect the law of return, knowing that every vibration emitted returns amplified. Thus, the creative triad, vibration, form, and sound, is not a dogma but a spiritual technology, a hidden art that the awakened soul can master with discipline, purity, and purpose. Those who learn to vibrate consciously learn to speak the language of the gods. Those who learn to form from pure thought create internal worlds that later reflect externally. Those who pronounce sound from the soul need not shout. Their word alone is enough to open doors. Therefore, mastery of this triad is the indispensable condition for any true act of manifestation. One cannot create abundance, harmony, or transformation without speaking the universe's hidden language. And that language is not learned from books, but in inner silence, where the mind ceases and divine vibration speaks. Chapter 4. Kriyâshakti, the science of the emanating thought. At the hidden core of all esoteric doctrines, both Eastern and Western, lies a teaching veiled for centuries beneath symbols, parables, and prohibitions, the existence of a latent power within the human being, capable of manifesting tangible realities through the force of pure thought. That power is Kriyâshakti. But it is not magic, not positive thinking, not visualization or suggestion. It is a cosmic force in its most intimate, secret, and potentially dangerous aspect. Kriyâshakti is neither a moral attribute nor a spiritual gift. It is a law of the universe, a current of energy that responds to the mental vibration projected from the causal plane. When this vibration is clothed with clear intention, sustained will, and emotional purity, it manifests not as a miracle, but as a natural law applied by a being who has mastered their inner structure and aligned with universal currents. The Sanskrit etymology of Kriyâshakti can be roughly translated as the power to do, the power to act. But this translation is crude without a metaphysical understanding. The true action of Kriyâshakti is not external, physical, or mechanical, but the causal action of thought directed from higher planes that generates material or psychic effects without physical intervention. It is creation at will, manifestation without error. It is the science that transforms man into the conscious architect of reality. However, to understand it rigorously, we must distinguish it from other subtle energies, particularly Ichchasakti, the power of will, and Jnana Shakti, the power of knowledge. These three, though interdependent, are not identical. Ichchasakti is the force that drives, Jnana Shakti is the light that guides, Kriyâshakti is the energy that structures and emanates the desired form, bringing will to its fulfillment. A thought, no matter how noble, does not create without Ichchasakti to propel it. A will, no matter how firm, does not bear fruit without Jnana Shakti to guide it. But both remain potential if there is no Kriyâshakti to externalize them as phenomenal reality. Kriyâshakti, then, is the operational bridge between idea and phenomenon, between archetype and fact, between divine mind and obedient matter. The Arat tradition teaches that Kriyâshakti resides in all human beings, but its development depends on the purity, alignment, and training of the thinker. In the uninitiated man, Kriyâshakti exists as disorganized impulse. He manifests unknowingly his fears, unconscious desires, traumas, and limiting beliefs, not because he thinks of them, but because he vibrates constantly in them, and this sustained vibration over time becomes cause. Thus his life is not what he desires, but what he has unconsciously emanated from his lower centers. In the adept, by contrast, Kriyâshakti is consciously channeled. Thought is not reactive, but causal. The idea does not arise from desire, but from the archetype perceived in Mudi Manas. Will is not impulse, but a cold fire sustaining the mental form without distraction. Emotion does not distort, but nourishes the vibration with coherent energy. And so what the adept thinks happens, not by miracle, but because they have learned to use the law of Kriyâshakti without internal fiction, contradiction, or error. Now, how is this force generated in the hidden plane? How can a normally invisible and fleeting thought alter matter, attract events, transform lives, heal bodies, or destroy obstacles? The hidden process can be explained as follows. When thought originates from higher mana, that is, from the mind illuminated by Woody, it descends as a living geometric form charged with pure intention. This form is not a concept, but a structured vibratory entity, a kind of mental being living in the higher astral plane. If that thought is sustained by Ichasakti, will without fissures, and nourished by a high emotion, then Kriyâshakti activates, the mental form densifies, magnetizes, projects itself to the etheric plane, and from there begins to draw substances, circumstances, people, and events that make its incarnation in the physical world possible. This vibratory descent does not happen instantly. It demands time, purity, and above all, internal coherence. If the thought contradicts itself, if the will wavers, if the emotion is tainted with fear or doubt, the form fragments, loses direction, dissolves, or attracts deformed results. That is why most men's thoughts do not create desired realities, but distorted versions of their intentions. They do not master Kriyâshakti. They are dominated by it, in its blind form. The secret to perfect manifestation is therefore vibratory purity. Only a being whose bodies are aligned, whose mana is united with Woody, whose ma is purified, whose etheric body is clean, can use Kriyâshakti without generating karma, because every unconscious use of this force returns. Every thought emitted to Akasha returns amplified, whether as blessing or punishment. The law is infallible. The difference between the white magician and the black magician is not the force they use, both employ Kriyâshakti, but the origin of the thought, the intention, and the moral and cosmic alignment with which it is launched. For this reason, the first training in using Kriyâshakti is not practice but purification. The disciple must learn to silence their lower mind, master desire, align thought with cosmic good, not personal gain. They must learn to think from above, not from need, to desire without attachment, to will without forcing, to manifest without possessing. Only then does thought become a ray, and that ray is not blind, but divine geometry, structuring the ether according to law. He who achieves this needs no words, no external rituals, no manipulation. It is enough to think from the correct level for creation to occur. Kriyâshakti is then the crown of mastered thought, the scepter of the inner magician, the tool of the lesser logos, incarnate in man. Its use is not a privilege of a few, it is the destiny of every human soul. Every thinking being is destined, sooner or later, to manifest with purity, accuracy, and truth. But for this to happen, the selfish thinker, the ignorant desirer, the unconscious creator, must die. The divine architect must be reborn, one who thinks in harmony with eternal archetypes and creates not from the self, but from the One. To master Kriyâshakti is not to obtain power, but to become worthy of the power one already possesses. And that worthiness is only achieved when thought becomes living prayer, instrument of good, channel of law. Chapter 5. Thought and the fiery bridge between idea and matter. Every true thought is fire in motion, not physical fire, but fire in its spiritual essence. And that fire needs a conductor, a mediator, a lightning bolt that crosses worlds and translates the pure idea born in the divine mind into concrete form. This mediator between the invisible and the visible, between the archetype and its reflection, is thought, the flaming ray of creation, the conscious energy of the Logos in action. Thought is not a metaphor nor an impersonal force. It is a cosmic intelligence that responds to divine will like an arrow responds to the bow. It is the messenger between worlds, the fiery thread that links the creative thought with the planes of manifestation. In the oldest occult teachings, whether in the Book of 100 or the Veiled Vedas, in primordial Kabbalah or Egyptian mysteries, thought is mentioned under various names. The spirit of ether, the horse of the gods, the lightning of thought, the builder of forms. The Book of 100 declares in its third stanza, "Thought, the son of divine thought, crosses 7 times the space, joining the center to the circle, the idea to the substance, and awakens the wheels of life." In this condensed verse lies the entire science of manifestation. Thought is the dynamic principle that descends from the mind of the low, penetrates all planes, and structures the undifferentiated substance of the tassa according to a specific vibratory pattern. In other words, it is the force that allows a thought to become a thing, an idea to become an image, an intention to become objective karma. When a thought is born on the plane of higher mana, it has no form yet. It is an abstract vibration, an archetypal geometry, a pure resonance. But for that vibration to become a concrete mental form, it must be projected down to the lower planes. Here thought enters the scene. It takes the idea as a seed, wraps it in etheric substance, and projects it through the 7 subplanes of the astral plane, organizing scattered energies along the way to build a coherent vibratory body. Every time you think strongly, and even more so if you do it from inner purity and conscious direction, you invoke thought unknowingly. As an obedient energy, it responds to the vibration of your thought and begins to act on the etheric plane. If your thought is clear, sustained, and without internal contradiction, thought structures a precise, powerful, luminous form. If your thought is murky, erratic, or contaminated by lower emotions, thought acts nonetheless, but it generates a dissonant form, a vibratory caricature that will attract chaos, not order. This is why many people, when desiring or obsessing over something, end up getting the opposite, or a distorted version. They don't understand that thought doesn't judge. It simply reproduces what it is given, like an architect who builds according to the received blueprint, even if it is incoherent. It does not correct, it executes. It does not choose, it obeys. It does not improve, it reflects. Thought as a living energy does not travel from one plane to another like physical lightning. Instead, it activates resonance points between planes, causing the vibration of an idea in the causal plane to generate equivalent waves in the mental plane, which in turn generate forms in the astral plane and movements in the etheric until they reach physical manifestation. It is like a stone thrown into a pond, whose waves spread in concentric circles. The stone is the thought. The waves are thought's work. Now this energy does not move arbitrarily. There are specific routes in the etheric plane where thought travels, natural channels established by cosmic harmony. These channels are the same ones life uses to create organs for the soul to inhabit, which the magician activates to heal, curse, or protect. They are lines of force connecting energy centers in the body, planet, and cosmos, through which condensed mental energy flows like an invisible electric current. When an adept wishes to manifest a thought, they first align their idea with a universal archetype, ensuring it is not the product of egoic desire. Then they elevate their consciousness to the plane of manas buddhi, from which they project the idea as pure vibration. Next, they focus Kriyâshakti, the unwavering will to sustain that form without dispersion, and then invoke Phot through concentration, rhythmic breathing, or silent mantra. Phot responds, takes the form, covers it with astral substance, and projects it into the etheric web. If this process repeats without encountering internal resistance, doubt, fear, or emotional contradiction, the image densifies and begins to attract atoms, people, situations, and events that vibrate in harmony with its shape. Thus, the idea born silently in the soul becomes objective destiny. But if this process is carried out without discipline, purity, and just purpose, the result is the opposite. Phot will act, but the forms it builds will be distorted mirrors of thought, and the manifestations will be confused, karmic, and harmful. This happens to the ignorant who play with decrees, visualizations, or magic without having purified their channel. They invoke unknowingly, create blindly, and then wonder at the outcome. Therefore, true initiates teach that Phot must not be manipulated, but respected. It is the same lightning that builds suns and destroys worlds. It is the serpentine fire that, misdirected, burns the soul and, properly guided, illuminates the path of higher evolution. Practically speaking, a disciple who wishes to work with Phot must fulfill 3 requirements. 1. Archetypal clarity, thinking from an eternal pattern, not whim. 2. Vibratory purity, eliminating contradiction, fear, and egoic desire within. 3. Sustained direction, focusing thought like a ray without distraction, doubt, or ambivalence. Then and only then will Phot respond, and its fire will be creative, not destructive. It will build realities, not illusions, because fire is neutral. It warms or burns according to the intention of the one who ignites it. Thus, to understand Phot is to understand the power of elevated thought, not as an abstract idea, but as a vibratory reality that crosses worlds and shapes the invisible. And whoever masters this fiery bridge masters the art of manifesting from the soul, not from the ego. Chapter 6. Mental Polarity, Positive and Negative Thought. In the occult universe, where form is merely the crystallization of vibration, and vibration is nothing more than the oscillation of an idea within a field of consciousness, all manifestation is polar. There is no energy without polarity. No creation exists without tension between 2 extremes. Thought, as the direct expression of the mind in motion, is no exception to this law. Every human thought, by merely existing as a vibration, carries a positive or negative polarity, centripetal or centrifugal, constructive or dissolving. And this polarity does not depend on the words that accompany it, nor on the declared intention of the thinker, but on the vibrational direction that its hidden essence contains. Here lies one of the greatest errors of modern doctrines, to assume that positive thinking is merely the declaration of noble intentions, the use of pleasant language, or the visualization of pleasing outcomes. Such interpretation is superficial, illusory, and dangerously incomplete. Not all positive thoughts are elevated, and not all negative thoughts are harmful. The key is not in appearance, but in resonance. In occultism, a thought is considered positive when it moves toward the source, when its energy ascends, organizes, and unifies around a higher truth. It is negative when it disperses, fragments, and moves away from the center of being toward the peripheries of ego, desire, or illusion. This is true polarity, not moral but energetic, not ethical but vibrational. For instance, a thought of spiritual pride might seem positive. I am reaching enlightenment. Yet, if its vibrational impulse arises from a desire for superiority, from the affirmation of the separate self, then it is a negative thought in occult terms. Its direction is downward, divisive, and will ultimately generate karma rooted in separation and error. Conversely, a thought of lucid humility, even if it acknowledges shadow, even if it admits fault, if born from the yearning for truth, if it rises toward purification and unity, it is a positive thought because its vibration organizes around the light. This principle also applies to external manifestation. Many seek to create abundance by repeating affirmations or visualizing pleasant images. But if those images are imbued with anxiety, unacknowledged lack, or greed disguised as enthusiasm, then the actual energy of the thought is negative. Though the words are sweet, that energy will attract confusion, contradiction, delay, or even downfall, because the vibrational polarity was dissonant with the original archetype of the good. Truly positive thought does not seek to possess, it seeks to be. It does not demand results, it cooperates with the law. It does not affirm itself in form, it orients toward the spiritual center from which form emanates. Negative thought, by contrast, is not only that which criticizes, fears, or rejects. It is above all that which separates, that which affirms the self over the one, that which acts as a reflection of desire rather than a channel of higher will. The direction of a thought can be analyzed as an energetic current. When the energy of thought ascends, it organizes the subtle bodies, ignites the higher centers, connects to higher manas, and receives the light of Buddhi. This centripetal current strengthens the soul, harmonizes karma, and attracts realities aligned with divine purpose. When the energy of thought descends, however, it agitates the emotional plane, pollutes the etheric double, and projects itself with force into the denser subplanes of the lower astral, generating chaos, karmic repetition, and undesired manifestations. This understanding radically transforms how we approach mental creation. It is not about thinking pretty things, nor denying difficult emotions, nor avoiding words of pain. It is about directing the energy of thought upward, aligning its polarity with the axis of evolution, allowing every idea to be a step toward unity rather than a reinforcement of separation. To do this, the disciple must learn to recognize the hidden signs of each polarity. Positive thought, occultly speaking, is marked by a sense of expansion without euphoria, clarity without attachment to content, an inward or upward direction, absence of personal need, and a presence of inner silence during and after the thought. Negative thought, in contrast, leaves clear, energetic traces. Emotional agitation, even if the images are pleasant, desire for control, outcome, or possession, mental confusion or fatigue after sustaining it, a sense of disconnection from oneself or entrapment in the ego, the impulse to compulsively repeat the image or idea. These signs must not be judged morally, but used as vibrational indicators. The mature disciple does not blame himself for a negative thought, but neither does he ignore it. He observes it, dissolves it, replaces it not with a prettier one, but with a deeper connection to truth, even if that means accepting a wound, a doubt, or a shadow. Because mental polarity is not corrected with images, but with consciousness. It is not reversed with affirmations, but with vibration. And that vibration is elevated when the soul ceases to ask and begins to serve, when the mind ceases to create and begins to listen, when desire yields to the will to be a channel of good, not its owner. This inversion of polarity is the first great magical act of the initiate. It is not a technique, it is a renunciation. It is not a conquest, it is a sacrifice. It is to cease thinking in order to obtain and begin thinking in order to cooperate. It is to abandon the use of thought as an instrument of the ego and preserve it as a ray of the logos in action. Then and only then does thought become truth in form, not by insistence, not by technique, not by attraction, but because its polarity resonates with the very heart of the universe, which is positive at its root because it is unity, because it is ascending fire, because it is love without object. Thus, to think positively is not to decorate the mind, it is to align it with the one. To think negatively is not to criticize, it is to forget the center. And every act of mental polarity is ultimately a choice of spiritual direction, not of emotional content. This knowledge, when understood and lived, transforms the disciple into a conscious creator, not of things, but of realities, not of forms, but of harmony, not of outcomes, but of destinies. For he who inverts his mental polarity becomes himself a living magnet of the good. Chapter 7. Kama Manas, the desiring thinker and its illusions. Within the invisible anatomy of the human being, where each principle vibrates as an autonomous yet interdependent plane of consciousness, there exists a critical zone, a point of perpetual union and conflict, the crossing of thought and desire. The sages of antiquity named this intersection Kama Manas, the desiring thinker. In this region of the soul, a subtle war unfolds endlessly. The self seeks clarity, yet is pulled by longing. It observes, yet desires. It decrees, yet doubts. It aspires, yet fears. And in this friction, this embrace between fire and water, between intuition and impulse, are born both the gravest errors of the human mind and the hidden conditions for its redemption. Manas, as already revealed, is the thinking mind. Its higher, luminous and abstract portion vibrates with buddhi and contemplates eternal truths. But its lower portion, when approaching the sensory and emotional realms, fuses with kama, the principle of desire, impulse, attraction and rejection. This fusion gives rise to a mind that thinks not with clarity, but with attachment, not with vision, but with need, not with knowledge, but with hunger. This is Kama Manas. Kama is not a flaw in creation. It is a necessary principle in evolution. It is the engine that urges the soul to move, to seek, to escape passivity. But without the guidance of buddhi, this movement becomes agitation. And without the governance of higher manas, desire disguises itself as thought and begins to fabricate logical illusions. For thought in the hands of desire does not seek truth. It seeks to justify what the ego wants to feel or possess. From this mixture arise contaminated thoughts, distorted ideas, yearnings disguised as wisdom. And so man believes he is thinking when he is merely desiring rationalized. He believes he decides when he is only being carried by an emotion masked as conviction. This phenomenon is as common as it is invisible. The majority of human thoughts are bastard children of that impure union. The danger of Kama Manas does not lie in its existence. Every incarnate soul passes through that state, but in the ignorance of its operation. For as long as the thinker believes his thinking is free, that his mind is clear, that his will is his own, he will be a slave to his own desire. And every thought born of that slavery will be a contaminated astral form, a dull mental form, a powerless decree, or worse, a vibratory command that will attract the very opposite of what was intended. This explains why humans so often manifest misfortune unintentionally. For their mind, even while repeating affirmations of success, is saturated with fear, urgency, and lack of faith. Because the desire driving their thought is not love of the good, but rejection of pain. Because the image they project is saturated with expectation, control, anxiety. And since the astral plane responds not to words, but to hidden vibration, what manifests is the real vibratory resonance, not the verbal appearance of the thought. This is the fundamental illusion of Kama Manas, making the soul believe it is thinking when it is actually desiring dressed as thought. And that desire, when sustained with intense emotion and constant repetition, invokes Fohat. And Fohat, ever obedient, constructs what it is asked, even if it is destructive. Thus karma is generated without evil intention. Thus poverty is unconsciously sought. Thus illnesses that are feared, relationships that are repelled, and scenarios one wishes to avoid are attracted. Because in the hidden universe there is no such thing as wanting to avoid. Every sustained thought is an act of attraction. The only way to dissolve this karmic knot is to cleanse manas of desire, to purify the lower thinker through the fire of higher consciousness. This is not about suppressing desire, which is impossible while the soul is incarnate. It is about re-educating the mind so that it does not think from desire, but from vision. And that vision can only emanate from buddhi manas, the higher self that does not desire because it has no need. That does not affirm because it already is. How is manas cleansed? Not by forced effort or denial, but through three fires. First, the fire of discernment. To learn to observe every thought, trace its origin, discover whether it is born of desire or vision, whether it seeks to possess or to understand. This silent discrimination is the beginning of purification. Second, the fire of renunciation, not renouncing action, but the fruit of action. Not the thought itself, but its result. When the soul thinks without desire, decrees without expectation, visualizes without attachment, desire dissolves from lack of nourishment. Third, the fire of sacrifice. To consecrate every thought to the universal good. To think as a sacred act, not as a tool of personal pleasure. To think as one who serves a higher cause, not as one who builds his own destiny. As these three fires act, the lower manas becomes clear. The mind becomes a mirror, not a furnace. Thought, no longer contaminated by desire, becomes sharp, clean, powerful. And then the mental forms projected into the astral plane begin to obey the higher archetype, not the lower karmic impulse. It is in this state that the true power of manifestation begins to unfold, because mental energy is no longer fragmented between what the soul desires and what it fears. There is no longer conflict between the projected image and the underlying emotion. There is no longer inner contradiction. Then thought becomes illuminated will. Desire is transmuted into aspiration, and karma manas ceases to be an enemy and becomes a redeemed servant, a vital force which, when subordinated to spirit, lifts the soul toward its destiny of ego-free fulfillment. Redeemed karma manas is the first step of the white magician, not the one who imposes his desire upon the universe, but the one who has emptied himself of all personal desire, and from that burning emptiness he thinks with the force of the Logos. Chapter 8. Buddhi Manas, the purified and guiding mind. Human thought, when not directed by impulses of desire, by ancestral habits, or by the mechanical echoes of the past, has the capacity to become an instrument of a higher light, a wisdom that does not think to solve, but to see. This inner vision, which is not formed with words, nor obtained through argument, nor constructed by analysis, descends from the plane of Buddhi, the spiritual soul, through the fiery thread of higher manas, constituting the supreme alliance of the thinking being with its divine origin. This fusion, consciousness, direction, governance, inspiration, is called Buddhi Manas and represents the true core of the incarnated higher self. On the invisible planes, the lower mind, even when silenced, cannot by itself attain higher knowledge. It may suppose, conjecture, deduce, but never know directly. For real knowledge is not content. It is a state of being. And that state is reached only when thought ceases to be the instrument of the separate self and becomes a ray of universal consciousness. To think from Buddhi Manas is not to think well or logically, it is to think from light. Buddhi is not emotional intuition or spiritual sensitivity. It is not a sentimental experience or a mystical epiphany. It is the direct perception of the eternal archetype, the inner vision of the true pattern behind all phenomena, without symbols, without the mediation of language. It is the principle that unites without confusion, that knows without desire, that loves without possession. It is wisdom in action. When this light touches manas, the mind becomes the lamp of the soul. It no longer sways between opposites, no longer seeks its own advantage, no longer clings to conclusions. It begins to see. The process by which manas rises and unites with Buddhi is not mechanical, not a result of repetition, nor can it be achieved through affirmations or mental exercises. It requires three inner conditions that cannot be faked. First, deep silence of karma. As long as desire speaks, Buddhi remains distant, not because it refuses to descend, but because its vibration is incompatible with that of desire. The soul must empty itself of inner agitation, not through repression, but through understanding, through renunciation, through lucid acceptance. Second, clarity of purpose. One does not access buddhi to gain power, wisdom, or control. It is only reached when the soul desires truth for truth's sake, without use, without egoic purpose, without a hidden agenda. This pure motivation, rare in the incarnated soul, is the true magnet that draws down the higher light. Third, sacrifice of personal identity. The thinker must be willing to let go of ideas, opinions, certainties, if they contradict the descending light. Buddhi does not negotiate, it reveals, and whoever wishes to receive that revelation must be willing to burn their most cherished beliefs on the altar of truth. When these three conditions are met, the connection between buddhi and manas becomes stable, growing, luminous. Thought is no longer a reflection of emotion or a repetition of others' ideas. It is active contemplation, creative vision. The soul sees the hidden pattern behind events, perceives the cause behind the effect, senses the true vibration behind appearances. It needs no persuasion. It knows. It no longer seeks. It embodies the answer. Thus, purified thought becomes a guide, a directive, a silent power. It does not aim to solve problems. It dissolves them by seeing their root. It does not need to defend itself. Its vibration repels all shadow. It does not battle error. It illuminates it until it becomes transparent. To think from buddhi manas is to think as the logos, to see as the universal mind sees, to act not from personal will, but from eternal purpose. This state is not permanent at first. It comes as a gust, a fleeting vision, a sudden clarity. But the disciple who has been touched by this light, even once, can no longer be satisfied with thinking as before. An irreversible process begins. The lower mind empties itself of old patterns, restructures itself, consecrates itself. It no longer seeks to understand. It longs to become a channel of understanding. It no longer wishes to control reality. It wants to express its truth. This kind of thought requires no effort, no repetition, no forced concentration. It flows like water, burns like fire, vibrates like a silent mantra. It is a state of being more than a mental act. It is the expression of a consciousness that has ceased to look at itself and has begun to reflect the light of the One. And in that plane, thought becomes true power, because a thought born in buddhi manas contains no doubt, no error, no contradiction. Its vibration is pure, its direction is exact, its effect inevitable. The adept does not need to think many times. Once is enough. When thought comes from that plane, the universe obeys, not because it is commanded, but because it is identical to the eternal rhythm that creates, sustains, and dissolves worlds. This is why all theosophical learning, every esoteric practice, every occult path has no other goal than to awaken and consolidate this fusion between buddhi and manas. Everything else is preparation. Knowledge, techniques, symbols, rituals, they are only ladders to that state. The real work begins when the mind becomes light and ceases to be only a mirror. From that moment on, to think is no longer to seek, but to reveal. Not to analyze, but to be a channel. Not to want, but to serve. And then, the human mind, which for centuries has been the vehicle of desire, ignorance, and suffering, becomes a living bridge between the world and the logos, a burning lamp that does not consume, a ray of wisdom that guides without words. To think from truth and not from need, that is the mark of the one who has united buddhi and manas. And that thought, because it seeks no benefit, manifests good. Because it desires nothing, it attracts without attachment. Because it does not assert, it transforms. Because it does not shout, it creates. Chapter 9, The Science of Mental Focusing. To think clearly is not to think much. To think with force is not to think fast. To think with power is not to repeat affirmations. Any thought that does not condense, that is not directed with precision, that is not projected with pure intention, is scattered energy, chaotic vibration, inert will. Ordinary human thought, that which circulates through the minds of men without guidance or purpose, is not an act of creation, but a vibratory exhalation without form, a mental fog wandering through the lower astral, dissolving before it ever touches the etheric substance. In contrast, the thought of an adept, rarely spoken, seldom issued without need, is a fiery arrow piercing the invisible fabric of the world, creating inevitable effect. What is the difference between the two? Focusing. To focus thought is not merely to concentrate. Concentration is only the first rung. Focusing means to condense, to align, to saturate and project the mind as a single-toned ray, without dispersion, without contradiction, without vibratory loss. Focused thought is fire, not diffuse light. It is living geometry, not verbal ornament. It is causal decree, not emotional elaboration. In the profane man, the mind is like a lamp without a reflector, radiating in all directions without penetrating. His thoughts multiply, contradict one another, entangle themselves, and dissolve before reaching the astral substance. Every emotion generates a thought. Every external stimulus drags in a new idea. Every desire projects conflicting images. There is no continuity, no center, no fire. Thus, thought is born dead, or worse, it creates incomplete egregores that wander like aimless larvae, drawing karmic consequences without control. A mind so dispersed cannot manifest, not because it lacks energy, but because the energy is disorganized, because the fire is not condensed, because desire interrupts, because doubt neutralizes, because habit fragments. The science of mental focusing begins with an axiom. Thought is living energy that requires form, direction, and permanence to become causal. If any one of these three is missing, the thought becomes astral noise, not occult action. And the world is full of this noise. Thoughts without owners, desires without structure, images without roots that cling to receptive minds and drag them toward unchosen manifestations. Therefore, the disciple who seeks to become a causal thinker must learn the alchemy of thought. This alchemy consists of three internal operations. First, monastic condensation. The mind must learn to hold a single mental form without altering its contour, its vibration, or its direction. This requires silent, daily training, not through forced effort, but through total presence. The thought must be observed as a living object, contemplated without judgment, nourished without emotional interference. In this way, the mental form stabilizes, is nourished, and begins to vibrate in harmony with itself. Second, energetic alignment. The thought must not originate solely from lower manas. It must be aligned with buddhimanas, with the higher intention of the soul. To do this, before thinking, the disciple must connect with the heart center, raise consciousness to the plane of inner silence, and from there allow the thought to emerge as vision, not reaction. This alignment ensures the purity of the thought's energy, its coherence of vibration, and the karmic neutrality of its projection. Third, rhythmic projection. Once condensed and aligned, the thought must be projected rhythmically. This does not mean mechanical repetition, but the emission of thought from the core of being in regular intervals, like a vital pulse. This rhythm creates waves that cross the etheric plane, anchoring the form in the causal substance. The projection must be silent, without anxiety, without expectation, like one planting a seed, knowing the earth will respond in its time. There are inner non-exoteric exercises that facilitate this process. They are not found in common books and should not be practiced as empty techniques. They require inner or direct guidance, but their essence may be sketched. One such exercise is the point practice. The disciple, in a state of inward stillness, concentrates attention on the brow center and visualizes a burning point of light, tiny yet intense. That point represents the idea to be manifested. It is not verbalized, not adorned, only held. The exercise consists in maintaining that point without alteration for minutes at a time, without dispersion, distortion, or dissolution. Repeated in purity, this practice develops a mind like diamond, fixed, penetrating, serene. Another exercise is axial projection. Once the mental form is consolidated, the disciple visualizes a line of fire extending from the crown down to the center of the earth and another from the same point upward to the starry heavens. At the crossing of these lines, the mental form settles like a seal. From there it is projected with an inner breath toward the astral plane, not violently, but firmly, like one shooting an arrow from the heart. This image is not poetic, it is geometric. Axial projection ensures vertical orientation of the mental form, avoiding lateral drift and attraction of astral larvae. These exercises must not be done with desire for results. If there is urgency, thought is contaminated. If there is impatience, the channel closes. The true thinker does not seek to manifest for himself, but to manifest in harmony with the law, and thus his thought has power because it is not reserved. A mind so focused does not need many ideas. A single thought conceived in purity, alignment, and proper projection is worth more than 1,000 reactive thoughts. It is silence that gives strength to thought, not repetition. It is clarity of origin that makes it creative, not emotional intensity. The disciple who learns this science becomes an invisible architect. His thoughts do not dissolve. They incarnate. They do not contradict. They fulfill. They do not depend on chance. They obey the structure of the law. To think, then, is not to speculate, nor to desire, nor to repeat. It is to construct on the invisible planes with geometric fire, with sustained vibration, with shadowless vision. Focused thought is ray, it is bridge, it is decree, and the one who emits it becomes not the owner of good, but its channel, not a seeker of power, but a servant of the One. Chapter 10. Astral Creation, the Birth of Thought Entities. Every thought sustained in human consciousness, when driven by desire, directed by will, and maintained over time, is born in the astral world as a living entity. This is not a metaphor, nor a psychological symbol, but an objective reality in the subtle plane. These entities that emerge from the act of thinking are true forms, endowed with vibration, color, geometry, and in certain cases, semi-consciousness. In occultism, they are known as thought forms, and when they reach a degree of collective autonomy, they are called egregores. The law that governs this phenomenon is both simple and formidable. Every thought is a creation, and every creation persists as long as energy sustains it. Nothing is lost in the invisible realms. What a human being thinks with intensity and repeats with desire does not vanish when attention ceases. It lingers, vibrates, attracts, and influences. Just as a child is born from a physical union, a thought is born from the union of will and emotion, and like every child, it lives, acts, and eventually returns to the source from which it came. When an individual thinks intensely, the thought crosses the lower mental plane and imprints itself on astral substance. That imprint, if charged with emotion, becomes a subtle body, a vibratory image possessing direction, color, and a defined field of action. This form either adheres to its creator or is projected toward an object, a person, a location. There it remains active, influencing whatever it touches. If created with hatred, it will seek to wound. If with love, it will radiate peace. If born of fear, it will sow chaos. These forms do not have a soul, but they have life. They do not think, but they act. They do not possess consciousness, but they respond to the vibration of their creator. As long as they are fed, with attention, with repetition, with emotion, they grow stronger. When forgotten, they slowly dissolve. But if they are sustained by a collective or linked to a strong idea, they can survive for generations. This is how egregores are formed, astral entities composed of thousands of aligned thoughts, acquiring autonomous strength and deeply influencing the behavior of individuals and masses. A religious egregore, for instance, is formed through centuries of devotion, dogma, fear, hope, and worship. It is a living entity that influences the emotions and thoughts of its followers, that generates visions, mystical experiences, and moral codes. It is not a god, but it may represent one. It does not have a will, yet it may act as if it did. Whoever connects to it comes under its vibrational field. Whoever opposes it feels its resistance. The same is true for egregores of war, vengeance, poverty, nationalism, and collective identity. On the individual level, each person generates daily thought forms that surround them like an invisible swarm. These entities cling to the aura, affecting health, mood, and destiny. A thought of self-loathing, repeated for years, becomes a dense astral form that acts as a magnet, attracting situations that reinforce its message. A thought of ambition, sustained with selfishness, attracts opportunities, but also invisible opponents, karmic clashes, and downfalls. The adept understands this. That is why he thinks as one who invokes, as one who creates worlds, as one who launches arrows that will return. Each time he thinks, he observes the form being generated, shapes it, purifies it, consecrates it, and once projected, severs it from his aura, knowing it must live on its own or dissolve, never return. He does not cling to his creations. He does not identify with them. He does not wish for their return, for he knows every mental form will return with the fruits of its action, and only he whose thought was pure, aligned, and free of error may desire that return. To understand how these entities are born and act, it is necessary to describe their occult characteristics. Color. Every thought has a color determined by the emotion behind it. Hatred is dark red, fear, murky green, selfless love, golden, deep understanding, indigo blue. These colors are not symbolic. They are real vibrational frequencies. Form. The geometry of a thought form reflects its logical structure. A chaotic thought has jagged edges. A focused one is symmetrical. High vibration thoughts have crystalline structures. Low ones are dense and viscous. Movement. Some forms orbit their creator. Others cling to their surroundings. The most powerful travel to their target and remain, influencing. If fed, they may return, to reinforce or burden their origin. Duration depends on willpower, emotional intensity, and repetition. A weak thought lives for minutes, a strong one, days. One sustained by faith, years. One fed by thousands, centuries. Effect. They act as messengers. They carry the Creator's vibration into the world. They attract similar energies, people, and events. They may heal, destroy, confuse, uplift, but they always return. Always. For everything emitted in the astral comes back. The student who wishes to master the art of thinking must first become an observer of their creations. They must learn to feel the presence of their thought forms, to recognize their vibrational signature, to see with the inner eye what entities they have engendered, and once they see them, they must choose, continue feeding them, or dissolve them. Dissolution is achieved through 3 operations. 1. Withdrawal of energy. Stop thinking the thought, cut off its nourishment. Ignore it, not by force or repression, but as one who ceases to feed a fire. 2. Disidentification. Understand the form is not the self. It was created, but it is not part of the soul. It can be dissolved without loss. This understanding breaks the bond. 3. Vibrational replacement. Create an opposite, superior, luminous form, not to combat the former, but to replace it. The higher vibration dissolves the lower without conflict. The white magician has no stray thoughts, generates no astral larvae, allows no contamination of his aura with unwanted forms. His mind is like a clear sky. Only what has been chosen with wisdom, formed with love and directed with power is projected into it. For to think is to create beings. To think is to populate the invisible world with entities that either obey or disobey, that bless or poison, that liberate or enslave. And the thinker is responsible for every one of his invisible children. To understand this is to stand at the threshold of true mental magic. The disciple who crosses that threshold begins to think as a conscious creator, not an unconscious dreamer. They no longer speak into the void. They begin to build in the ether. Their mind is no longer a shattered mirror but a womb of sacred forms, and their word, their silence, their inner image become instruments of divine manifestation. Chapter 11. Directed Mental Projection, Attack and Protection. In the deepest arcana of the mental arts lies a faculty long feared, forbidden, used in secret, and ever watched by the lords of karma, the ability to project a thought deliberately and consciously toward another human being, entity, or place, with the intention to influence, modify, protect, or harm. This faculty, when mastered, transforms the thinker into an active agent in the hidden planes. And like every powerful force, it can illuminate or destroy, heal a soul or sicken a body, bless a brother, or open gates to shadowy entities. It is, therefore, the flaming sword of the soul, wielded either by the angel or by the fallen one. To project a thought is more than to think of someone. It is to launch a mental form, charged with intention, emotion, and direction, into the energetic field of another consciousness. If well constructed, this form penetrates the aura of the recipient, adheres to their vibrational structure, and begins to influence their thoughts, emotions, decisions, and even physical states. All this can occur without the receiver being consciously aware. In the inner planes, there is no such thing as a private thought. Every thought charged with intensity and precise direction becomes emission, becomes influence. There are two fundamental types of mental projection, the involuntary and the voluntary. The first happens daily in all human beings. A thought of criticism, envy, or lust directed at someone acts as an astral projectile. If the target is vibrationally open, the mental form attaches. If not, it rebounds and returns. The second is the result of deliberate construction. The mental magician visualizes, structures, charges, seals, and projects the mental form like one casting a ray or energetic dart. In wise hands, this practice is a tool of healing, protection, and esoteric teaching. In ignorant hands, it becomes a curse, a means of control, a form of psychic vampirism. When an adept seeks to influence another being, it is never from a desire to dominate, but from the responsibility of shared karma. He does not impose, he guides. He does not invade, he touches. And before launching his creation, he lifts his consciousness to the higher planes to ensure the act aligns with divine law. For he knows that all mental influence over another generates double karma, for the thought projected and for its effect on the other. If the act is unjustified, the intention impure, or the energy unbalanced, the projection becomes karmic debt. Ancient schools taught projection techniques that today are lost or profaned. These practices demanded absolute purity, emotional neutrality, and spiritual clarity. To project a mental form without inner purification is like hurling poison with a wounded hand. Some of it seeps back into the caster. Every thought directed at another bears the vibrational signature of its creator, and if rejected or resisted, it returns amplified to the sender. Thus, initiates use mental projection only under three justified circumstances. 1. To protect another being when the threatened soul cannot defend itself, and the adept acts as a vibrational shield. 2. To awaken dormant consciousness when a seed of truth must be planted in a ready mind without violating free will. 3. To dissolve harmful mental attacks when another consciousness has launched damaging forms and the initiate restores astral balance. In these cases, the projection is not invasion but service, not manipulation but assistance. And the projected thought does not bind like a chain, it shines like light. But even then, the adept protects himself. Just as one may project thought, so too may one receive foreign thought. Most souls, unaware of their psychic boundaries, remain open, defenseless, exposed to the ocean of mental forms flowing through the astral plane. The fear, desire, envy, or doubt of another can enter the vibrational field of one who has not sealed their inner gates. Therefore, mental protection is no esoteric luxury. It is a necessity for every traveler of the path. Initiates guard themselves through several occult methods, among which the most prominent are the vibratory shield, a subtle net of fire surrounding the aura, fueled by pure thoughts, deep silences, and daily discipline. This shield automatically repels all dissonant forms. the seal of silence, the abstention from emitting thoughts charged with desire, judgment, or weakness, which may create cracks in the aura. The more neutral and elevated the mind, the more sealed it is from external attack. The axial invocation, the daily connection to the divine axis that links soul to logos. This link generates a descending current of energy that cleanses, protects, and seals the mental field. Conscious rejection, the voluntary denial of entry to any foreign mental form. A thought only enters if it finds inner resonance. Without it, the form dissolves. The disciple who wishes to project thoughts in purity must first purify himself, master his mind, know the law, and understand that the power to influence another is, in essence, the power to assume shared karma. No projected thought goes unreturned. No directed mental act escapes the tribunal of the Buddhic plane. This is why the true magician thinks little, but each thought becomes law. To master mental projection is to become a channel of the logos, not its imitator. It is to serve as a transmitter of good, not an executor of desire. It is to understand that the mind is a temple, not a catapult. That every mental form is a promise fulfilled, every thought sent a child that returns, and he who thinks of another touches them, changes them, and becomes responsible. Thus, to project mentally is sacred art. It is high magic. It is medicine or poison, and only the one who has sealed his heart with white fire can cast thoughts without sowing darkness. Chapter 12. Abundance and Misfortune, Manifestations of Karmic Thought. All phenomenal existence is karma made manifest. Nothing happens without cause, nothing sustains itself without vibration, and nothing repeats without debt. In this wheel of causality, thought is the most subtle, constant, and underestimated tool by the sleeping humanity, because it cannot be seen, because it cannot be touched, because it is believed to be free. But in the hidden realms, where substance responds to mental impulse like iron to a magnet, to think is to sow destiny, to desire is to attract form, to imagine is to summon the future. And just as one may attract health or clarity, one may also, with the same invisible precision, attract illness, scarcity, and darkness. All depends not on superficial intent, but on the hidden vibration of sustained thought. Karmic thought is that which has been repeated so many times in this or previous lives that it has become an internal vibratory law. It no longer needs to be recalled. It acts from the depths of being. It is a habit of the soul, an etheric programming, a structure that organizes reality around the thinker. Thus, every human lives surrounded by an architecture of ancient thoughts, some their own, others inherited, many unconscious. That architecture, invisible to the eyes, is the true cause of what we call abundance or misfortune. Abundance is not a reward from heaven, nor is misfortune a punishment. Both are responses from the etheric universe to the vibratory signature of a consciousness. Every outer form is the resonance of an inner form. One cannot attract what one is not. One cannot maintain what is not supported vibrationally, and one cannot avoid what has been cultivated through constant thought, even without explicit desire. This principle, when misunderstood, leads to one of the greatest spiritual errors of our time, the belief that it is enough to think positively, to desire wealth, to visualize success, or to affirm abundance in order to attract it. This illusion, sustained by pseudo-esoteric schools, has corrupted ancient knowledge, turning the sacred art of thought into an emotional caricature and perverting the very idea of spirituality by making it synonymous with material well-being. From the perspective of sacred science, abundance is not the hoarding of forms, but the soul's freedom within them. It is not measured by possession, but by the absence of need. The adept may live surrounded by riches without being touched by them, or in utter nakedness without feeling lack. For their wealth lies not in what they have, but in what they are: expanded consciousness, unbroken will, silent service. True abundance is a consequence, not an objective. It is the expression of alignment, not the reward of visualization. It is a sign of energy in circulation, not of vibrational accumulation. The disciple who seeks to manifest prosperity through thought without understanding this law may attract things and yet impoverish their soul. Because every object attracted by desire becomes a burden. Because all wealth not aligned with the soul becomes karma. Because whatever is possessed without having been inwardly integrated creates energetic debt. Abundance is not manifested. It is reflected, not conquered. It is allowed, not imposed. It is inherited from the higher self. Misfortune, on the other hand, whether economic, emotional, or physical, is not the absence of blessing, but the presence of dense thought forms, astral larvae, karmic egregores that surround the soul and shape its experience from the unseen. These forms have been generated by thoughts of fear, unworthiness, hatred of wealth, limiting beliefs, vows of poverty from past lives, unconscious contracts. And until those entities are dissolved, external reality will obey their mandates, not the conscious wishes of the individual. It is not enough to want to escape poverty. One must dissolve its vibratory archetype. It is not enough to affirm wealth. One must stop fearing it, judging it, idolizing it. Because every judgment is a vibratory bond, every criticism a karmic tie, every intense desire a larval form that demands nourishment. And thus, unknowingly, the soul keeps active the web that chains it to lack. The science of karmic thought therefore requires a deep cleansing of the mental field. This cleansing is not done with words, but with fire. It is not achieved with affirmations, but with lucid introspection. It is not accelerated by techniques, but by truth. The disciple must observe their recurring thoughts about matter, money, power, and security. They must detect the emotions attached to them, fear, guilt, anger, need, and trace those emotions to their vibratory origin, not to repress them, but to transform them with the fire of understanding. Once the mental field has been cleared, true creation may begin. Thought, no longer fragmented by desire, nor polluted by judgment, nor sabotaged by fear, can align with the pattern of the higher soul. And that pattern always includes abundance, not as accumulation but as flow, because the soul that serves must have what it needs, because the soul that gives must be able to receive, because cosmic energy does not flow to what is stagnant, but to what is open, available, and pure. Then abundance manifests not as something sought but as something natural, not as an event but as a state, not as hoarding but as circulation. The soul becomes a channel, thought becomes decree, life becomes offering. And if misfortune comes, the soul passes through it without identification, because it knows that all effect is temporary, all loss is liberation, all lack is an opportunity to see what thought form sustains it. It no longer reacts. It observes, corrects, transforms, because it has learned the law, nothing comes from outside. All is form of karmic thought. To think, then, is to choose what kind of wealth we desire, the kind that dazzles and binds, or the kind that liberates and serves, the one that seduces the ego, or the one that consecrates the soul, the one that is possessed, or the one that flows. The adept always chooses what flows because they know that everything possessed without need rots, because they know that energy which accumulates becomes weight, because they have seen that what is not given is lost. And so their thought creates without desire, receives without attachment, and distributes without fear. Abundance or misfortune, both are manifestations of the same power, both obey the same law, both are mirrors of thought. The wise do not seek to change the mirror, they change the face that looks into it. Chapter 13, the Theogy of Thought. When the soul speaks. There comes a stage along the hidden path where thought ceases to be an instrument of analysis, creation, or desire, and becomes a ritual act, a silent invocation, a sealed communion between the soul and the eternal. This use of thought, not as a means to understand or control, but as a liturgical act of spiritual manifestation, is called mental theurgy. It is not philosophy, it is not psychology, It is an arcane art reserved for those who have learned to silence the lower self and listen to the language of the soul. At this stage, thought no longer arises from the ego but from the higher self. It no longer asks, interprets, or reacts. It simply is, and its word is light. Theogy, as a sealed science, is the union of the human soul with divine intelligences, and thought, once purified of all egoic intention, becomes its principal channel. Theurgic thought is not mental creation, it is inner listening. It is not speculation, it is revelation. It is the soul speaking to itself in a language without form, yet one that shapes forms, without sound, yet one that awakens echoes in the invisible planes. When the mind has become an altar, its fire cleansed of lower passions, karmic reflections, and the hunger for results, it can receive the word of the higher self and shape it into thought form. Such a form, born from the soul, does not act like a human thought. It is an act of power, a vibrational seal, a sacred decree, a causal emanation. It does not seek to convince. It does not seek to please. It simply is, released into the ether, and its release brings inevitable consequences to the planes it touches. Soul-born thought does not get constructed. It descends. And its descent occurs when three conditions are met. 1. Absolute mental silence, no internal dialogue, no judgment, no doubt. The mind becomes a vessel, not a transmitter. Empty of self, it reflects the eternal. 2. Pure moral vibration, no personal agenda, no hidden desire to possess, to control, to receive. The soul rests in a posture of service, surrender, obedience to the higher law. 3. Sustained focus on the archetype. The thinker's awareness is fixed on a universal principle, justice, compassion, truth, beauty, without confusing it with its outer expression. The principle is contemplated, not its application. When these three conditions are fulfilled, the thought emitted is no longer thought. It becomes a silent mantram. Its vibration needs no words, no invocations, no sound. Even in utter stillness, such mental emission carries the same effect as a sacred ritual, for it is a true act of theurgy. It is the soul speaking in the language of the gods. Though this kind of thought may seem simple, it is feared by the forces of shadow. They cannot divert it, corrupt it, or anticipate it. It holds no emotional fractures, no personal desire to cling to. It is pure fire, and therefore it dissolves astral larvae, shatters egregores, opens gateways in the Akashic plane, and summons the Lords of Light. To think in this way is to pray without words, to serve without movement, to act without contact. The one who thinks from the soul does not need to act, for his thought is causal action. He does not need to speak, for his thought penetrates. He does not need to impose, for his thought is law. The adept, when thinking in this state, does not do so to decide or to gain answers. He thinks as one who sounds a note in a universal symphony. His thought becomes part of the cosmic rhythm, a vibration within the great current of divine will, and that is why it holds power. From this height one understands why thought must not be profaned, why to think falsely is to speak falsely, why to think from desire is to use the word in vain, why every thought is truly an act of magic, and the one who thinks without awareness is a blind sorcerer, casting spells unknowingly. The mind is either a temple or a trap. If not consecrated, it becomes a lair of astral parasites. If not emptied of ego, it breeds illusion. If not placed in service of the good, it aligns with shadow. That is why the initiated fear thought more than the sword, error in thinking more than misstep in action, and desire disguised as logic more than blatant fault. The mind is the channel, the soul is the mantram. When the two are united in purity, theurgy is born, and from there, to think is to create light, to decree destiny, to summon hidden help that never arrives by chance. The disciple who reaches this state no longer wonders whether his thought will manifest anything. He knows that every thought emitted from the soul is already manifestation. He does not wait for results. He lives in the eternal present of true vibration, and from there his thought guides without force, instructs without words, creates without disturbance. To think from the soul is the highest of powers and the quietest. It is the hidden art of being one with the law, and the one who masters it, though he may possess no riches, followers, or titles, becomes the invisible creator of humanity's future. Chapter 14, Black and White Mental Magic. Infallible criteria. The mind, supreme instrument of the incarnated soul, can become either the vehicle of the highest light or the most subtle darkness. There is no holier realm, nor a more perilous one. For thought, being a vibrating fire, can illuminate or burn, can heal or corrupt, can liberate or enslave. It is along this double edge that moves the art once called mental magic, in the mysteries, the science of thought directed to produce invisible and visible effects in the vibratory field of the universe. But the art of thinking with power is also the threshold where the paths of white and black magic diverge, not in rituals, appearances, or symbols, but in the deep, vibratory intention with which thought is emitted. Here every word becomes a decree, every image a conjuration. And whoever does not know the infallible distinction between the two paths may easily become a channel for shadows, while believing they serve the light. White magic is that which serves the universal purpose without any mixture of personal interest. Black magic is that which uses universal laws for particular ends. This absolute, non-negotiable distinction does not depend on the outer form of the mental act, but on its hidden cause. Thus, the thought that seeks to help another, but does so from the desire to control, disguised as spiritual ego, has already crossed into the path of shadow. The thought that seeks to manifest abundance, but does so from fear of lack, or a desire for superiority, has invoked forces that respond not to the soul, but to the lower self. The first sign of the black magician is the use of will to impose. Their thoughts always have strong direction, but do not consult the inner logos. They seek to mold reality according to their desires, even when these are disguised as noble goals. They speak of love, yet they demand. They speak of truth, yet they exclude. They speak of light, yet they create chains. The black magician's thought is rigid, obsessive, emotionally charged, and devoid of humility. It does not flow, it pushes. It does not reveal, it convinces. It does not serve, it uses. The second sign is the manipulation of archetypal images to summon power. They use symbols, mantras, visualizations they do not deeply understand, yet employ them to attract entities, force outcomes, or alter wills. They do not serve the archetype. They attempt to wield it as a tool, and by doing so they disconnect from the spiritual source and become entangled with lower astral forces, which are always ready to serve at the highest cost, the soul. The third sign is the absence of inner silence. The black magician cannot quiet the mind. Their thought is constant, directed, but noisy. They do not know how to wait, to listen, or to contemplate. Their ideas are held with tension, not with truth. Their energy is heavy, dense, vibrationally aggressive. Their presence, even in silence, imposes itself, demands attention. This is the mark of a mind possessed by the desire for influence. By contrast, the white magician, the true one, not the self-proclaimed, does not emit thoughts without need, nor does he seek to influence. He does not project unless called by the higher law. He does not think out of desire, but out of service. His mind is a lamp lighting without force. His thought is not direction, it is reflection. It is a seed offered, not a weapon launched. And for this reason his power is infinitely greater, because it springs from the center, not the edge, because it desires nothing, and thus can channel everything. The thought of the white magician is neutral, harmonious, vibrationally elevated. It contains no friction, causes no reaction. It is silent geometry. His mental form, even before it is released, has been purified in the crucible of renunciation. And when it is projected, it does not return to its sender, for it did not come from the self. It was borrowed from the Logos and returns to its source. The white magician has made 3 silent vows, never proclaimed, but inscribed by fire in the soul. First, the vow of truth. He will not think anything that is not aligned with the higher reality. He will not use thought to embellish, persuade, or protect the ego. Second, the vow of service. Every thought will be emitted only if it is useful to another soul, not to his own desires. He will not seek personal results. Third, the vow of silence. He will not intervene with thought in another vibratory field unless he has been invoked by the law or by a soul in legitimate need. He will respect free will as a sacred law. These vows are not made with words but through deeds. They are not declared, they are embodied. And they mark the absolute boundary between the white magician and the one who, though believing himself to have good intentions, has already been seduced by the personal use of power. Any mental practice that seeks results before truth, that desires to attract without asking why, that affirms without having contemplated, that invokes without having renounced, has already crossed the threshold of grey magic and will soon be absorbed by the dark currents of disguised desire. For this reason, the infallible criterion to discern the white path from the black lies not in results, but in origin. A white thought may manifest nothing outwardly, yet it leaves peace. A black one may attract riches, but it leaves emptiness. A white one may seem useless, but it uplifts. A black one may heal the body, but it sickens the soul. The key lies in what happens at the center, not the periphery. Thought is not just an instrument. It is a test, a mirror, a path. And he who uses it without having conquered desire will become a slave to his own creations. But he who consecrates it to the One, without mixture, without urgency, without possession, becomes a bearer of the silent word that transforms worlds without touching them. Chapter 15. Final Mastery of the Thinker. Man as Demiurge. The circle is complete. The path of thought born in the abysses of blind desire, traversed through shadows and illusions, purified by the flame of transformation and sharpened by the clarity of discernment, finally leads to the inner throne. There man ceases to be a wandering thinker and becomes a demiurge, a conscious builder of worlds, a microcosm who reflects with purity the geometry of the Logos. Not as a divinized desire, but as a free emanation beyond karma, governed by law and filled with impersonal wisdom. This mastery is not about thinking positively, nor about achieving external results, nor about shaping a reality to fit the cravings of the ego. It is when thought no longer arises from the lower mind, but becomes a direct prolongation of the universal mind. Man no longer thinks by himself. He becomes a channel for eternal thought, vibrating in harmony with the living archetype that orders, sustains, and guides all. Then, and only then, is the ancient promise fulfilled, hidden in every mystery. Man shall be as the gods, not by arrogance but by alignment, not by power but by purity, not by rebellion but by consecration. This final mastery of thought is attained when the following conditions are fulfilled, not as exercises, but as permanent states of being. 1. The silence of desire. There is no personal desire within the thinker that conditions his vibration. Thought is no longer emitted to obtain, but to reflect. It does not seek to alter the world, but to express the pre-existent harmony of the inner cosmos. 2. Union with the archetype. The thinker no longer imagines, but contemplates. He does not invent, he perceives. He does not project, he receives. His thought is a contemplative act that descends from Buddhimanas as coherent light. He thinks from the causal plane, and thus each form he emits aligns precisely with the laws of the universe. 3. Will without fracture. His thought is sustained without effort, not because he forces it, but because there is no internal division. There is no fragmented self, no unconscious shadow sabotaging from within. There is no vibrational contradiction between what he thinks, feels, says, and does. In him, thought becomes a single line of fire. 4. Emptiness of the ego. Identification with the thinker has vanished. There is no thought that says, I want, I think, I decree. What occurs in his mind is the emanation of the One through the purified channel of the soul, not the act of a personal subject. Thought has become non-dual, like the gaze of the gods, which sees without judging and creates without desiring. And so in this state, thought becomes a causal ray, a cosmic decree, a vibratory act that generates forms in the astral plane, directs currents in the etheric, shapes destinies and attracts circumstances without generating karma. Because there is no I emitting it. It is the Logos manifesting through a monad that no longer imposes its imprint, but has become identical to the source. In this state, every thought is a command the universe obeys, not by force, but by resonance. The disciple who has attained this mastery need not speak. His very presence reorganizes the environment. He does not need to command. His silent intention gives structure. He does not need to decree. His vibration shapes substance without sound. This is the supreme gift of thought, man as demiurge, not as a capricious god, but as a co-creator of the great plan. For the true demiurge does not create from ego, but from the central fire of being. His creation is not personal, it is an act of service, and thus his works are perfect, not for their form, but for their fidelity to the archetype. For this being, thinking is no longer a voluntary act. It is a permanent state of creation. Each thought is a vibratory jewel, each image a cell in the invisible world, each decision a wave that brings order. He no longer fights chaos, he emits cosmos. He no longer fears error, for he has renounced thinking from himself. This mastery is the destiny of every human soul. It is not the privilege of a few. Every being who purifies the mind, renounces desire and consecrates themselves to the One will one day become a demiurge, not to create wealth, fame, or comfort, but to be a bridge between the Logos and the worlds, a silent channel of eternal will, a spotless mirror of divine thought. And then the mystery is fulfilled. The thinker has overcome thought. The mind, no longer divided, no longer reactive, no longer enslaved, becomes the living word, and in its vibration, the worlds are illuminated. Thus ends the path of thought, not in possession but in renunciation, not in power but in obedience, and not in success but in service. To think is to create is to serve, and to serve is to be one.